The whole cafeteria went quiet the second Thalcor slammed his tray down in front of me. I did not look up right away. I finished chewing, swallowed, and only then met his eyes. That single pause was enough to make his crew laugh, like I had already lost something just by taking my time. "You're blocking my light," I said. "You don't need light," he said. "You need a spine. Does your species even have one, or is it optional, like your claws?" More laughter. I counted 7 students at his table, all from stronger, faster, older species than mine. Vakari mostly, with a couple of Dranic cadets who liked to watch more than talk. I was the only human at my table that morning. My friend Priya had a morning lab. It was just me, my tray, and about 40 pairs of eyes deciding whether today was the day the funny little human finally cracked. I had been at Thessic Prime for 4 months. In that time, I had learned that reacting was the worst thing I could do. Every laugh, every jab about how humans could not survive open vacuum, could not see in the dark, could not outrun a Vakari sprinter, was a small test. They wanted a reaction. I had promised myself I would not become their proof. So I picked up my fork and kept eating. Thalcor leaned closer than was polite even by his species standards, and lowered his voice so only I could hear it clearly. "I looked up your planet's history," he said. "Do you know what the summary said? Fragile, slow to develop weapons, no venom, no natural armor, no claws worth mentioning, a species that survived mostly through luck and cooperation." He smiled, showing more teeth than a smile needed. "Luck runs out, May." I set my fork down. "Careful," I said quietly. "You might be the first person in this school to actually read something before repeating it. Try finishing the article next time." His smile flickered, just slightly, before he forced it back into place and walked off with his friends trailing behind him, already laughing at some joke that was probably still about me. My roommate Yeva slid into the seat across from me a moment later, her 4 eyes blinking in that fast, worried way that meant she had seen the whole thing from across the room. "You are shaking," she said. I looked down at my hands. She was right, just barely. "I'm fine," I said. "You are not fine. You are furious. Your species hides anger differently than mine, but I have shared a room with you for 4 months. I know the signs now." I almost laughed, because she was not wrong, and because it felt strange that a girl from a planet with 3 moons and no history of large predators could read me better than most humans back home ever had. "He's an idiot," I said. "That's all." "He is an idiot who is ranked first in combat class," Yeva said. "And he has been telling everyone he wants a match against a human before graduation. To prove a point, he says." That was the first time I heard the word match used out loud, days before it became something I could not avoid. By the following week, it was not a rumor anymore. It was written into the schedule. Combat ethics was a required class for every student in their second year, human or otherwise. The idea, according to the course description, was to teach restraint, not aggression, using regulated sparring under strict safety protocols, padded gear, monitored vitals, an instructor watching every second. In theory, nobody got hurt. In theory, it was about learning control. In practice, it had become the place where reputations were built. Instructor Doran announced the pairings on a Thursday morning, reading names off a display without much ceremony, until he reached mine. "Mayo Conquo Larson," he said, "paired with Thalcor Vesserai." The room went very still, the way a room does right before something interesting happens to someone else. I raised my hand. "Instructor, may I ask for a different pairing? There's a significant physical difference between our species." Doran glanced at his display, then at me, clearly unbothered. "The pairing algorithm accounts for skill level, not species. Cadet Thalcor has agreed to limit his output to 70% capacity, in the interest of fairness. This is an excellent opportunity for both of you to demonstrate control." I looked at Thalcor. He was already grinning. "I don't mind going lower than 70, he said, loud enough for the class to hear. "Wouldn't want to embarrass anyone." Someone snickered. I felt my face go warm, not from embarrassment, but from something closer to being tired of explaining myself to people who had already decided what I was before I opened my mouth. "I'll take the match," I said. Doran nodded, satisfied, and moved on to the next pairing like nothing important had just happened. Yeva caught up with me in the hallway afterward, matching my pace with her longer legs. "You could still refuse," she said. "There is an appeals process. Dr. Reyes could argue on your behalf." "If I refuse now, it proves everything he's been saying," I said. "That we're too fragile to even try. I'm not giving him that. You could get hurt." "I could," I said. "But I won't lose." Yeva looked at me for a long moment, her eyes doing that quick blinking thing again, like she was trying to solve a puzzle that did not have enough pieces yet. "You say that with a strange kind of certainty," she said. "You've never met my grandmother," I said, and left it at that, because I was not ready to explain what I meant, not even to myself. That night, I sat on my bunk and let my mind wander somewhere I usually kept locked away. My grandmother used to tell stories about her own grandmother, who had crossed a desert on foot with 3 children and almost nothing else, because staying meant certain danger, and leaving meant only probable danger. She told these stories like they were ordinary, like every family simply had one, and when I was younger I thought maybe they were ordinary, until I got older and understood that surviving impossible things was not unusual in human history. It was the baseline. It was what most human families carried somewhere in their bones, whether they talked about it or not. My track coach back on Earth used to make us run until our legs shook, not because she enjoyed watching us suffer, but because she believed something simple and old-fashioned, that the body could keep going long after the mind wanted to quit, if you trained it to expect that gap and push through anyway. She called it the second wind, though there was nothing magical about it. It was just biology, and stubbornness, and practice. None of that showed up on a species profile. None of that fit into a summary that called us fragile. I did not sleep much that night. I did not think I needed to. The morning of the match, the training hall was fuller than usual. Word had spread. Even a few instructors from other departments had found reasons to stop by, standing near the back with expressions of polite academic curiosity that did not fool anyone. Thalcor was already warming up in the center ring when I arrived, moving with the loose, easy confidence of someone who had never seriously doubted an outcome in his life. He caught sight of me and straightened up, rolling his shoulders. "You showed," he said. "I half expected you to fake an illness." "Wouldn't want to disappoint your audience," I said. Doran walked us through the safety protocols, the padded gear check, the monitored vitals link, to the clear boundaries of the ring. Standard procedure. Then he stepped back and raised a hand. "Begin when ready. Remember, this is a demonstration of control, not a contest of dominance." Thalcor smiled at that instruction like it was a joke meant just for him. He came at me fast. Faster than I expected even after weeks of watching him in class. I sidestepped, more out of instinct than skill, and felt the rush of air where I had been standing a moment before. The crowd made a soft sound, somewhere between a gasp and approval. I did not try to match his speed. I could not. And pretending otherwise would only get me hurt. Instead, I focused on distance, on angles, on making him work harder for every attempt than he expected to. He was strong and quick, but he had spent his whole life relying on those two things. He had never needed patience. I had nothing but patience. Minutes passed. He landed a few controlled hits, nothing serious under the padded gear and safety limits, but enough to remind me this was not a game. I stayed on my feet. I kept my breathing steady, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way my coach had drilled into me 1,000 times on a running track that felt very far away now. Around the 4-minute mark, I noticed something small change in Thalcor's movements. A fraction slower on his pivots. A slightly longer pause between attempts. Nothing anyone else in the room would have caught, but I had spent 4 months studying how he moved. The same way I studied everything about this place. Quietly, without announcing it. He was starting to tire. I was not. "Something wrong?" I asked, keeping my voice even, refusing to let it shake. "Nothing," he said too quickly, and came at me again. The match went on. 6 minutes. 8. 10. The crowd, which had started out loud and eager, grew steadily quieter, the way people go quiet when a story stops matching the ending they expected. I kept moving. I kept my guard steady. I did not try to overpower him, because that had never been the plan. My plan was simpler than that, and older than any strategy taught in this school. Outlast, adapt, refuse to be the one who quits first. At the 12-minute mark, Thalcor made a mistake. A small opening in his defense caused by fatigue rather than carelessness. I did not take it as a chance to strike hard. I took it as a chance to end things cleanly, using a controlled hold that the class had practiced for weeks, the kind meant to demonstrate restraint rather than cause harm. He tapped out. The room went completely silent. Doran stepped forward, checking both our vitals readouts with visible surprise before clearing his throat. "Match complete. Both cadets, report to medical for standard post-match evaluation." I released the hold immediately and stepped back, offering my hand without thinking twice about it. Thalcor stared at it for a long moment, his chest still rising and falling fast, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. Then he took it, and let me help him to his feet. 12 minutes, he said quietly, mostly to himself. I have never gone 12 minutes with anyone in this school. "I noticed," I said. He looked at me differently then, not with anger, not even with the wounded pride I expected. Something closer to genuine confusion. like a piece of information he had trusted his whole life had just quietly stopped making sense. "How?" he said. It was not really a question yet, it was the beginning of one. "I'll tell you," I said. "If you actually want to know, not to win an argument, just because it's true." He nodded, slowly, and for the first time since I had met him, he looked like he was actually listening. Dr. Reyes found me an hour later, sitting alone on a bench outside the medical wing, still catching my breath in a way that had nothing to do with tiredness, and everything to do with everything else. He sat down beside me without asking, which I appreciated. Dr. Reyes had a habit of never making a big moment feel bigger than it needed to be. "I heard," he said simply. "Word travels fast here. Faster than light, some days." He smiled, small and tired in a familiar way. "How are you feeling?" "Confused, mostly," I admitted. "Everyone here talks about humans like we're some kind of accident. Lucky, fragile, soft. I used to think maybe they knew something we didn't, some official assessment I hadn't seen." Dr. Reyes was quiet for a moment, choosing his words the way he always did, carefully, like each one had weight. "There is an official assessment," he said. "From the first contact years. I've read it." I turned to look at him, and? "It doesn't say fragile," he said. "It says something closer to this. A species with unusually high pain tolerance, unusually high physical and mental endurance, and an evolutionary history defined by adaptation under pressure, rather than raw natural advantage. The recommendation to other compact species was caution, not comfort. Somewhere along the way, that got lost, or maybe it got quietly ignored, because caution isn't a very satisfying story to tell about the new, smaller species that just joined your neighborhood." I sat with that for a long moment, letting it settle somewhere deeper than surprise. "So they knew," I said. "This whole time they knew, and decided to believe the easier version instead." "People do that," Dr. Reyes said. "Species do that too, apparently. It's easier to feel comfortable around something you've already decided is beneath you. Comfort doesn't require respect, it just requires a story you like better than the truth." "That's a very human observation for someone with a doctorate in interspecies relations," I said. He laughed, a real laugh, and it was the first thing that had felt light all day. "Maybe that's the point," he said. "We understand this pattern better than anyone, because for most of our history, we were on the other end of it. Someone always tells the story about who is fragile and who is strong. Usually, the ones telling it are the ones who never had to test the theory." I thought about my grandmother again, about the desert she had crossed on foot, about all the stories my family carried that had never once used the word fragile. "He asked me how," I said. "Falcor, after the match. He actually wanted to know." "That's rare," Dr. Reyes said. "Most people who lose an assumption like that get angry instead. Curious is better. Curious means it might actually change something." Word of the match spread through the academy faster than anything I had seen in 4 months there. By the next morning, I was getting looks in the hallway that were different from before. Not fear exactly, but something closer to recalculation, like people were quietly rewriting a file they had been carrying about my entire species. I found Thalcor in the training hall a few days later, working alone, moving through drills slower and more deliberately than I had ever seen him move before. "You're overthinking your footwork," I said, leaning against the doorway. He glanced up, and for a moment I braced for the old sharpness to return. Instead, he almost smiled. "I've been thinking about a lot of things," he said. 12 minutes mostly." "It's not really about the 12 minutes, I said, walking closer. "It's about what 12 minutes means. You're built for short bursts, explosive speed, explosive strength, overfast. My species evolved for something different. Long chases, long droughts, long winters that didn't care how strong you were on day 1, only whether you were still standing on day 90. "That sounds exhausting," he said. "It is," I said. "But it also means we don't panic when something takes longer than expected. We're used to things taking longer than expected. Basically, our whole history is one very long story about things taking longer than expected, and us showing up anyway." He considered that for a long moment, turning it over the way a person turns over a stone that has turned out to be heavier than it looked. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "Not because you won, because I decided what you were before I ever actually looked." "Most people do," I said. "I'm getting used to it." "You shouldn't have to get used to it," he said, and there was something almost sincere in the way he said it. Rough around the edges, but real. "Maybe not," I agreed. "But I'd rather be underestimated and prove myself than be respected for reasons that were never true in the first place. At least this way, nobody gets to say I didn't earn it." He nodded slowly, like that idea was settling somewhere new inside him. Rematch someday? He asked, properly this time. No 70% limits. No audience deciding the story before it happens. I smiled, actually smiled, for what felt like the first time in weeks. Sure, I said. But you should know something first. What's that? Next time I won't just be outlasting you, I said. I'll be ready for how fast you actually are. You've seen what I can do when I'm still learning. Imagine what happens when I've had time to prepare. He laughed. A real laugh this time. And for the first time since I had arrived at Thessic Prime, it did not feel aimed at me. It felt like something shared. That evening, I sat by the observation window with Yeva, watching the slow turn of stars that did not belong to any sky I had grown up under. You seem different, Yeva said. Lighter, somehow. I think I finally stopped trying to prove something to people who were never going to believe it without seeing it themselves, I said. It's tiring, carrying an argument you didn't choose to have. And now? Now I just get to be who I already was, I said. Turns out that was enough all along. Yeva was quiet for a while, watching the stars with me. For what it's worth, she said eventually, I never believed the fragile story. Not really. Something about it never made sense to me. A species that survived that much, that adapted through that much, spread across an entire galaxy in less time than most species take to leave their own solar system. That doesn't sound fragile. That sounds like something else entirely. What does it sound like to you? I asked. She thought about it for a long moment, her 4 eyes catching the starlight in a way that made them look almost thoughtful. Patient, she said finally. Patient, and very, very hard to stop. I looked out at the stars, thinking about my grandmother's desert, my coach's endless laps, 12 minutes in a training ring, that had changed something in a boy who had never once had to wonder if he was strong enough. Yeah, I said quietly. That sounds about right. The stars kept turning outside the window, indifferent and endless, the same as they always had been. But something in the room felt different now, lighter, like a story that had finally started being told correctly. For the first time since I had left Earth, I did not feel like the smallest thing in the room. I felt like exactly what I was. Enough.